there were some big kind of shows for certain record labels that I was doing at the time. Um, Ed Sheeran, I would perform with Ed Sheeran before he was big. And so like things that I reflect on now, that I just think, at the time as a teen, 20 something, you don't really think too much about.
Yeah.
But then you reflect on many years later and, you think, okay, that was actually really, really wonderful time.
Welcome to today's episode of The Power Shift. And it's a very special episode because we're doing a first that we haven't done before, where we are actually recording a live podcast as part of the Doctors in Industry group mentoring session. And we're really, really fortunate to have a very, very special guest with us today who I've known for some time now and seen how she's really developed her career from musician life, we'll talk about that, to a very highly sought out after expert, not only a GP, but a specialist in AI, lifestyle medicine, women's health, and really has developed a great niche and portfolio career for herself. So I really want to warmly welcome you, Kimya, Dr. Kimya Tarr. Welcome to today's episode.
Thanks, Avena. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's I think a long time coming, basically. So it's great to have you. So I mean, there's so much we can cover, but always wanted to take it focus. So before we started, I mean, I was just saying earlier today, I was in Hale House in central London, Healthtech working space, co-working space, recommend it, everyone if you're listening. And I was having a chat with the Babylon Health team who you used to work with, which I'll talk a little bit about. And we were talking about how, obviously you've got the medicine and the AI, but also the creative side of you. And so I'm really curious to hear, and I always kind of start this, like, how would you describe yourself, especially very earlier on in your medical career, and how you balance that with music? Like, what happens there? What happened there? Tell us a little bit about that, how you started your career and how they
Sure.
interlinked.
Yeah, I'd love to, Avena. So I think if we go back even a little bit before medical school, I've always been a very creative individual, equally very interested in science and technology. So you're kind of taught early on at school that it's kind of one or the other, right? And
Yeah.
I
Musical
kind
medicine
of,
for me.
yeah, and coming, from a very my parents are very traditional and having an older brother who as well, very scientific and but I kind of felt, I always felt I could do both, basically. I never saw, I'm an artist and a musician. I never saw that as a barrier or a problem. I actually always thought, well, I'm super interested in medicine. I'm very driven by helping people and science, but also love that freedom of expression within sort of arts. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, just at school, I always continued both, the science, the maths, as well as the art and the music. Um, and even during A levels, managed to, do an art A level as well as, the chemistry, and then the biology. Interestingly, got a place to do architecture as well as medicine. And then, that could have been a really interesting career. But life is about choices, right? It's not about luck or it's really about like your choice and the decisions that you make. So went into medicine and you know, we know it's one of the most difficult degrees to do, highly competitive, super intense. Um, I mean, it was a wonderful experience. We're all clinicians here, um, but always felt there was something missing. And Abena, you'd mentioned this in our conversation earlier as well. Um, it's very vocational, and there's a set path, which is a positive. It is a positive for most. Um, but yeah, I always thought, I have this, these other interests. And I felt at the time, which I think was probably more of a perception than reality, like, why is it that my medical colleagues aren't interested in music or aren't interested in art or aren't? And that probably was wrong, because I think everybody actually was, but we just weren't having those conversations. Bana, like medic footprints, we didn't even have sort of, what you were doing didn't exist, or, we access to that internet and tech, I'm not that old, but, it wasn't so accessible as it is now, that kind of
Yeah.
online digital network.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just can again continue to pursue these creative interests alongside. I must say it really helped me through medical school, because how wonderful to have, a hobby or a creative interest. We know now through science that, it's brilliant for, mindfulness, mental health, like the huge benefits on a, human level. So I just ended up writing a lot of music, recording, and whilst I was at medical school, again, like I say, life is about your opportunities that you find and you make for yourself. Ended up just applying for a kind of award, sort of scholarship at music school, um, and ended up winning this scholarship for a year to go and study in a prestigious music school. I think, how old was I? Maybe still in my teens, early 20, yeah, 1920. So
Was
it's a
this
huge
before you started medicine?
This was during medical
Oh,
school.
this was during med
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
I just want to jump
So
in there because
yeah,
obviously med school, 5 years, however long it is, it's a long time. What
mm,
prompted you to actually go and say, right, I'm going to apply for something completely out of medicine, which will probably interrupt my studies. We'll find out whether it did. That, yeah, not aligned with medicine, and because that's really interesting. So a lot of people, especially in the medical journey, it just sounds really risky to be like, you've got this like
yeah,
certain pathway. If you continue in
yeah,
it long enough, you'll get a certain wage and certain prestige and status. Whereas in creative arts, risky.
yeah. Totally risky. And so, I mean, there was nothing stopping me, I actually never thought I would win the opportunity. And so when it happened, I spoke to the dean at the time, and they were very supportive. They were, again, was almost felt a little sort of shamed at the time that, what were they going to think about this? It's totally opposite to the path that I'm on. But the dean was highly supportive, encouraged that I didn't leave, but I was granted a sabbatical to go and pursue, um, and then to pursue this, and then, with a view that I would come back. Essentially, my opportunity to continue medicine would always be there. Um, and so that was it. Then I, moved to London, and it was just something totally, you know, distant from anything that I'd ever done before. We talk about transferable skills, right? I think I learned so much just going into this industry where there's not a clear path, and you really had to network, and it just taught me a lot of things that I think subconsciously now I probably kind of use. um I don't want to go into like too much details or name dropping, but there were some big kind of shows for certain record labels that I was doing at the time. Um, Ed Sheeran, I would perform with Ed Sheeran before he was big. And so like things that I reflect on now, that I just think, at the time as a teen, 20 something, you don't really think too much
Of
about.
it. Yeah.
But then you reflect on many years later and, you think, okay, that was actually really, really wonderful time. Made some really great friends as well, like in the music industry. Lots,
Mm.
lots who have gone on to do really well. And yeah, so it was just a wonderful time. Met my future husband. So lots of kind of paths aligned
Yeah.
in this thing
I
that
mean, I
happened.
find that so fascinating because
Yeah.
obviously, if you were peers with Ed Sheeran and, had you continued on that path, this would be a very different conversation. We probably wouldn't be
Yeah.
speaking.
So
I'd
I
probably have to be
think,
speaking, like digging through some PR bods and buying a ticket to your sold out tour of the
I
world.
know.
Um,
Well,
and just listening to your music. Like what, yeah, I'm just really curious. Like, what is it that drew you back to the practice of medicine?
yeah. So I think it's about risk appetite, Abena. So I think what you mentioned about the risk. So uh, on reflection, it wouldn't have been hugely risky because, like I say, many of my friends that I made there and the people that I met have gone on to have great careers in the music industry in all sorts of, not everyone has to be Ed Sheeran. Do you see? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many opportunities
Mm.
in the arts. Um, but I think it was just about like one was the risk appetite. Um, and then maybe it is really hard in that industry as a woman
Harder
as
than medicine, would
well.
you say? Now reflecting
Yeah,
on it.
like much harder than medicine. And I think you do look at artists like Ed Sheeran, and we mentioned about resilience, didn't we, earlier on,
Yeah.
and persistence. And I think those in any profession, those are like the key. You have to be persistent, you have to stick at something, and you have to be resilient. Regardless, if you want to, I was persistent and resilient in my medical profession, right? Because I kept going and I kept going. Like you say, had I just carried on in that area, then yeah, it would be very likely if I'd have dedicated as much energy into that in the long run as I'd done in my medical career, it might have been that, yeah, it would be a very different path. But yeah, life is about like, choice and decisions and what's right for you. And I think on reflection, I think I made the right decision. Like I'm really happy with how my career has evolved as a GP and in tech and AI. Um, so I don't kind of look back and think, what if? I actually see it all as very, all positives. So and just yeah, also a nice story. um
I'm so glad I actually had that conversation with them because I was like, oh, guess who I'm speaking to today? And they were like, well, one, they were also talk they brought up your website and your music and everything and your YouTube. And then they were like, your rabbits have gone viral on Instagram. She's got this like her own. I'm like, what? So I had to mention that on this.
that was a
Um,
lockdown. That was boredom in lockdown, Dana, and they just went viral. So that's no, I can't claim any talent or any, yeah.
Awesome. But it explains. I mean, like, I'm really glad that you shared the story and framed it as you did because it explains how and why you're not, I saying like just a clinician, as in you've developed your own portfolio career and shaped it as you've wanted it to be in very like relatively young sectors, which is like health tech and AI. And in itself, that's risky in the medical sector. I was like super brave. So I'm gonna bring in Maya, who is going to ask a question about that transition into health tech and AI?
Yeah, so my question is, what inspired you to enter the AI health tech space?
I'm going to pause you there, Maya. Do you want to introduce
Oh, sorry.
yourself
Hi,
for
I'm
the
Dr.
podcast?
Maya. I'm Dr. Maia Hays. I am a postnatal health coach that helps women go from barely surviving to thriving through the power of coaching.
Brilliant. Go. Doctor's an industry fellow, industry leadership fellow. Let's go.
So what inspired you, Kimya, to enter the AI health tech space?
Sure, thanks. So, um, I think it again, it comes back to what we talked about earlier, just about in medicine always being on this sort of set path. So like I say, I had the time out. I went back to finish medicine. I always continued music alongside, released music, all off my own back, essentially on my own. And I finished med school and then did, went on along the path, did the foundation training, decided that I wanted to go into general practice again, whilst continuing music, like with gigging. I was also, doing night shifts and gigs, and, it was really quite intense for some time, combining these two. Um, and so I I went through GP training, really enjoyed it, but always thought there must be something else, like there must be a different challenge. I mean, I love medicine, I love consulting with patients. I find my job as a GP very rewarding. Um, but that sort of creative problem solving sometimes felt lacking, particularly as a registrar or a trainee. And so actually, when I finished my training, I set up a very small like aesthetics business. So doing some non-surgical aesthetics. And so I'd finished and I'd kind of thought, okay, I want to set up my own, I was doing the music. And then I thought, okay, let's kind of branch out into aesthetics and see, what that's like. So did the training there, did some treatment, started to do that. Again, found it quite rewarding. And I I think we then moved to from the West Midlands to Buckinghamshire, and then so I kind of was out of my comfort zone again. So finished training. My network that was in the West Midlands is now not there. So I had to do a lot of networking. And you whilst medicine, the training pathway is quite set, once you're off that, it's quite different. You kind of end it and you're like, okay, if I haven't got a job at my training practice, what do I do? So you end up having to network. And so that's just, what happened. And I remember starting work as a locum GP, interesting, but I think Abena, it was through Medic Footprints. I think because I was always looking for something else that would inspire me and take my interest, and grab my interest. And health tech was kind of a non-thing then. We had like our, electronic health records, and, it wasn't really a thing. Like there wasn't telemedicine, or um, there were some, companies out there doing kind of like triage and symptom checking and things like that. And I think it was through a relative of mine who mentioned this company called Babylon. And so I just I'm trying to remember exactly what happened, but I think there was a post about, I started Googling Babylon, about them looking for some GPs to come and do some testing for their symptom checker. And like I say, that was kind of one of the few things that was kind of bubbling away at the time in that space. And so went there, went to the offices, and it was in central London, South Kensington, and just thinking, wow, stepping into their offices to come and do the testing
I
work.
remember their offices quite well, actually.
Yeah.
I did visit the offices, and you had Ali, and you had Umang, and you had the crew, and yeah, it was like, actually, that was quite early on in their journey, and obviously, it grew since then. But just moving things forward a little bit,
Yeah.
I really love the way that you started off doing the typical clinical doctor role, right? But then once you were in, managed to then acquire another opportunity, working on the tech side of things, so completely non-clinical. So
Yeah.
would you be able to share how you made that transition? Because one of the challenges that we see with doctors is like, how do I get, I know it's a bit different now, but how do I get into a non-clinical tech role without having to do another qualification to do it? And obviously it was less competitive then, but you took like one of the, like, I have three routes when it comes to getting to health tech: the front door, the side door, and the back door. And that's very much the side door route. As in like you're kind of in and then you're moving across to something else. So do you want to share a little bit about any insights
Yeah.
as to how that happened?
Honestly, just through that one opportunity, it just opened the door. And I think that's what we've mentioned about networking in this talk earlier on. And I think that's key. So I went and just was really impressed with the team, and also went there to do quite a good job. We all do, right? We're all conscientious, but really made an effort. And I think then they knew me. And also it's amazing, like when you speak positively and you're just nice to people, like how far it goes. And when you just speak to people. So I think at Boehner, then there was, I think you'd advertised it on Medic Footprints, the fellowship at Babylon. So I just applied. Again, like the music thing, it was kind of not expecting to get it, but just why not, right? If you don't apply, the worst that can happen is you get rejected. Well, it's not the end of the world. And so ended up just falling into it that way. I was really impressed with the products actually and the AI and what Babylon were doing. So that was hugely inspiring at the time, as well as the people that were there at the time, like the caliber of my peers at Babylon. Like if you look at some of the people that were on that fellowship now and what they're doing, like it's many people have gone on to do really great things. So yeah, I would say for me that was the route. Yeah, just through one little thing, it can open up so many doors.
It really is incredible, because obviously, like, you look back exercises, like how did you get into this, and how it's been a launch pad for so many careers for a lot of doctors, just to have that opportunity in the early days when doctors and AI and tech weren't necessarily kind of linked and associated with each other, like organically at least. And now we fast forward to today. Clinical AI is like this, it's a burgeoning specialty, or however you want to call it now. That's on the forefront of every doctor's lips, right? They're all like, hey, I want to get involved in clinical AI. How do I do that? Well, and obviously, just moving a little bit further, you know, you worked at Babylon for quite a number of years in this role alongside your clinical practice, and then Quadrivia, where you're the medical lead and still working with Ali Parsa, who's the founder of Babylon. So do you want to tell us a bit about, again, because again, relationships, networks, like how did you end up in that role and how did that differ?
Yeah, so I was at Babylon for 5 years. Actually, I was yeah, I ended there when Babylon went into administration effectively. and I was on maternity leave at the time, and was just looking for the next thing at the end of that. And it, literally just through the connections, through the alumni groups, which are very active. Like I mentioned, so many people, ex-Babylonians now, are founders, CEOs themselves. So it was just like I think mentioning earlier, uh, you know, you kind of build your reputation and you network in your job, and you never know what can happen, down the line in future. So I think it's just so important to build that, network around you and really do your job well, and set that good impression. But yeah, it was just through the alumni groups, that Quadrivia in the very early days were looking for a clinician to come in. So again, it just happened that way.
Like,
So I
were
was,
you invited to apply? Like, what was, I'm just curious as to what that pathway was like for you.
yeah, it was an invitation.
Mm,
Yeah, it was an invitation. So just came on board at the end of the mat leave. I'm also due
mm.
to go on. I'm expecting a baby very soon again. So but in terms of how it differs, so um I think in terms of what me as a clinician can contribute, it's quite sort of standard. I would say that, however, the experience that I've gained is totally, incomparable now, because the value that I can bring, having had 5 years in health tech, and the skills that I've gained, it's totally different than when I was just starting out. But just, briefly, as a clinician, we bridge that gap between like the tech world and the clinical world. Um, making sure that what's being built is useful, right? Is safe. Um, for us, it's, second nature, like, but for, an engineer or data scientists, like it's not necessarily. So being able to communicate effectively, and clearly is crucial.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's lots of other things, like being able to contribute on the go-to-market or commercial side. So
Mhm.
you can really relate as a clinician to other clinicians, potential partnerships, or, decision makers in certain
Mhm.
organizations as the clinician. Um, and yeah, obviously, if you have other skills like research, health data, informatics, coding, like these are all really valuable, can make someone even more valuable. But it really depends kind of what interests you and, what you want to do. But I just say there's so much opportunity in this space.
Yeah. I think that's really really interesting and exciting, those insights. And I just wanted to go back because, again, being invited because of your network and because of the being nice at work and being you and doing a great job into another role, again, is, again, a lot of doctors say, what's the pathway into this role and what's the pathway into that role, and do I need to do another qualification to do it? And I'm constantly saying, no, you don't. And so it's like having these kind of stories, which is really important. And the second point was around developing that commercial mindset. And again, we hear from doctors, I don't have that commercial mindset. Do I need to go and do an MBA and then apply? So what would you say in that's like, how did you develop your commercial mindset and provide value? Because obviously bringing in the clinical aspect um, is really valuable, but some of the challenges we see is clinicians chat like they struggle to bridge that gap between the clinical knowledge and actually how it translates to building a product that you can sell to a healthcare provider.
Mm. I mean, I definitely advocate for education skills development. but I think there's different routes into it. One is the more formal route. The other is just developing the skills on the job. Um, you might be more academically minded and want to go down that route of an MBA. It can be quite expensive. Um, Maybe if you're looking to go into more of like a niche area, or that could be beneficial, like a more technical kind of role potentially. But like I say, there's lots of leadership and other kind of MBAs that I know people have been on that have set them up quite well. But I don't think there's a right or wrong. Um, just the pathway that I have gone on thus far has just been more through a sort of organic route, and just learning on the job. And for example, I had no understanding or knowledge of like clinical safety, regulatory affairs in AI or health tech when I started. But I'd like to think that the organization saw the potential, rather than the kind of I mean, I'm a doctor, so I have credentials, but they saw the kind of potential. Um, I just think just as a woman as well, I know we're probably all familiar with this stat, but men will apply for a job if if they think they've got 60%
Absolutely.
of the skills, and women only if they like know they have
100%.
100%, right? And I think like it's not true, as in that stat's probably true, but having to do that, or feeling that you need that is not true. So just I think I just don't think there's a right or wrong. I would not sort of say one way or the other's right. It kind of is what feels right for you and what you are able to kind of commit to and dedicate to. Um, but yeah, purely the route that I went down, which has worked for me, with my skills and my kind of personality and interests, have been that more organic path into health tech.
And do you feel that there's any comparison between someone like you who has done the organic pathway in developing your expertise compared to someone who has done the academic qualification MBA course, or is there kind of no real comparable just based on your experience?
You mean like the end result?
Yeah, isn't like what are employers looking for? Does it how does it differ? Does it stand out in practice? Because a lot of doctors are saying, do I invest in this? Will this make all the difference?
Yeah.
And as you said, like there's lots of different pathways into one thing. It's just like countless, and then you do what's right for you. But for those people who are like, I'm not sure whether I should do this first before I then go in, or because they're doing it to get in. And the question is, in practice, is there any discernible difference that you've noticed from your own experience?
Um, I've not noticed I've not noticed it. I think you can become successful and reach your goals either way. I think it's all about the journey, and the decisions that you make and what's your goal, and then you map out how you want to get there, and everybody has will map out a different path. Um, and I think some organizations might value people that have had more like on the job experience, or, have built their own businesses or sold their own companies, or whereas, there might be another organization or a role that values, more technical skills or abilities. So, um, yeah, I think it really depends probably what your goals are, what you want to achieve. Like what is, yeah, I think it's hard to kind of blanket say yes or no, but it's just more about on an individual level. Like for you, where do you see yourself, and then how do you want to get there? And there's a formula for everything. Like it's not about luck. I mean, there's a bit of luck, right? But there's a formula. So look at kind of what like look at, I'm not saying stalk stalk people, but look out there, look at how other people, I don't know if there's someone who you aspire to be or be like what credentials have they got, what have they done, and maybe how have they got there. That can help guide you and help with your decision making as well.
Yeah, they do say success leaves clues, right?
Yes.
But some of the part of the challenge of that, especially in a online world, is that what you see online isn't what actually happened necessarily. In fact, most of the time it's not what, and this is one of the reasons why we do these podcasts, to understand the detail behind what you see, on social media. So, you see a lot of, say, doctors who are like, I was in clinical and then I became this like mega superstar with like 100,000 followers on LinkedIn, right? And you don't really see what it took to actually get there. And yes, you see the experience and the qualifications, but you don't realize that actually there's a whole team behind this person. They've had coaching, they've had challenges, they've had depression, like you don't see that. And so, yeah, I totally agree. Like success leaves clues, but I would definitely encourage anyone that's listening to like take it with a pinch of salt of what you actually see online and try and find out what actually they needed to do to get there beyond any qualifications or anything else. And sometimes like a lot of people are quite open these days and do share that narrative even more. But definitely take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
But anyway, before we close, is anyone else in our Doctors in the Industry audience, has anyone got any more questions for Kimya?
I'm just going to add really quickly on that point you just said, Bain.
Yeah.
Having a mentor or
Yeah.
someone who can help with that, someone who's got somewhere or has a skill that you are really interested in, so reaching out, and so that can really help with that as well. But yes, go back to
Having a
your
mentor is
questions.
crucial, isn't it? It's so crucial. And I think we haven't touched this, but I can imagine like with the mentors that you've had, informal and formal, has had a big part as to how you've developed your career and your portfolio in this space. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Thank you. So we've got Desaline.
Hi, my name's Desaline Joseph. I'm a sleep physician and I'm a sleep health tech consultant. So I help companies improve their product accuracy and increase their user engagement, moving towards better sleep outcomes. You mentioned that for some people, they maybe carve out a niche in terms of what their further skills are. So you mentioned what are the kind of generic skills or pain points. And then you mentioned things like research, data, coding, informatics. Did you cover those in your Babylon fellowship, or did you just pick up things along the way? And if you were to pick one out of those four, which ones do you feel more passionate about? Or for those of us going into the space, which would you say actually this is quite important?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. That's a really great question. So, um, at Babylon, it was a combination. So the fellowship is in almost like an industry placement. So just learning on the job. There was also a sort of digital health curriculum that was developed. Boehner Keith will talk all about this. So it was a combination, but primarily it was just through doing the job. And I think in terms of value, um, I wouldn't say one thing or the other. Clinicians can become like medical advisors, they could go into product roles, become informaticians, founders, CMOs, like it's just so vast, medical content. I just think, you know, it depends, like I say, in terms of value, what is it that you are interested in and where do you want to go? And I think what's most interest and of value kind of on a personal level, because the opportunity is just so broad. Hope that answers your question.
Brilliant, thank you. And we've got Kiran.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Kiran. I help managers who are struggling to reduce health inequalities through community health worker interventions and devising strategies for sustainable funding. Um, yeah, I'm really interested to hear your journey. It was quite interesting. Can I just ask, did you study in Birmingham?
Yes.
Yeah, because I did as well, and I had a similar experience. I don't know if you ever went to the medicine bar
Oh, yeah.
and if you heard of Education.
No, actually.
It was a night that I used to MC at. I used to
Ah,
be a resident MC. We ran hip hop nights there, and
amazing.
Yeah, we've
yeah,
got musicians in this fellowship. We've got musicians in this
yeah. I
program.
realized there are just
A
so
lot of
many
them actually.
musicians who end up doing these kind of things, and
Mm.
yeah, and I think it kind of somehow leads you down this creative path, doesn't it, to try and do something different
Mm.
and play with what you've got to, drive your passions forward. And yeah, and I've just started thinking, like I've been going back to my roots, thinking about community health workers. That's where I started off on this journey as I started to leave, the more clinical side of medicine, and started to think about music again. Just started writing lyrics, and I wondered, and it was just more of a fun question. I wondered, do you fit music still into your day, or how do you do that?
Yeah, I try to. I'm a mum of a 2-year-old. So my music taste has changed somewhat, to try and keep him entertained on car journeys in particular. But I do, and I want to encourage that sort of with my children as well, because I think it's just such a wonderful skill. So where I can around my work and my family life, I do try to continue. But yeah, it's juggling juggling everything now with a growing family can be quite the challenge. But yeah, I do. We'll have to connect, Kieran. I'd love to hear your music.
Yeah, for
To
sure.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
definitely need to start some kind of musical medics in tech and industry movement because
yeah,
I mean I do love the whole like I say they're the unicorns, but actually we're quite common because especially when you're in innovation and in a sector like health tech, because you do require a lot of creativity, adapting, pivoting, collaboration, and like a lot of those skills you will get in in music, right? And also the risk appetite too. So it's incredible. It's incredible to hear another story. But I wanted to say thank you so much, Kimya, for sharing your story. Like we've covered so much today. From your musical career, which is still ongoing, not at the forefront, but still there. We talked about risk appetites. We talked about getting into the Babylon and like how you use that to then pivot into another role in clinical AI whilst juggling a family, whilst continuing your love of medicine. And yes, you can have it all.
It's not
you
possible.
know well, you're living it because then a lot of doctors are like, I've got this passion, and I was like that, as I've got music and I've got to choose one or the other, and it's so binary and black and white. And I did find it difficult to maintain them, especially when I started working. I think that was the biggest challenge because you're like wiped out constantly. But it's great to hear that you have continued it, but also used it to develop your career moving forward. So would love to see what happens after baby number 2 and where this will take you. But I'm sure it's going to be incredible and impactful.
Thanks so
So
much.
thank you. And if anyone wants to get hold of you, how would they best do that?
I'm on LinkedIn. So yeah, would love to connect with everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kimya.